Podcasters Roundtable, round 47 podcasting apps. So podcasting has a lot of apps these days, right? Apps to subscribe to podcast, apps for your own podcast if you want to create an app for your show, and apps to help you create podcast. And then there's, apps is a strange word I'm realizing as I was putting this together, because are we talking about mobile apps, desktop apps? So this could go anywhere, right? Because apps seem to be sort of turning into a generic term, or maybe it's the right term. Anyways, we will find out. Podcasting apps. Daniel, he likes the idea. We were talking about this before. I was saying, hey, we need a topic, and we've done a couple one-word topics. And this is sort of along those themes. So we're going with podcasting apps, 2 words, but we're throwing it out there. And if you watch this show, you realize that the topic is really the jumping off point, and we take it anywhere because this is just a conversation with friends, right? And hopefully the title will help us lead the conversation. But seriously, I was telling the guys before we started, I challenge you to throw us off topic, take it somewhere, because this is literally just buddies sitting around having a beverage or whatever and talking podcasting. And then the goal is that you learn something through our discussions. You pick and choose, cherry pick the stuff you like, and you take it back to your show and implement it. Or you come up with something that you're doing, share it in the chat, and we can implement that, right? So lots of learning can happen just through discussion. So if you're interested in being on a roundtable, you want to get to podcastersroundtable.com, sign up there. When you sign up to the email list, you'll be put into this little form that will give you an option to supply your email name and like topic ideas. Okay, so submit that so I know you're there. And lately what I've been doing is looking to who shows up for the RSVP. If you RSVP on the event page, I know you're going to show up, and I see that you can already make it because these tend to be last minute when I'm getting a hold of you. And I'll go down the line and see who matches that to who's sort of put in their name for a topic, and I'll see if they're available. I believe, I think Joseph might be on. He might be the person that qualified for that. So he had already RSVP'd, and that was awesome. So let's meet the roundtable today, and our distinguished panel, 2 new roundtablers. But let's start with co-host on my far left, Daniel. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from theaudacitypodcast.com.
You look like you're going to say a little more there, but
no, I'll save it for later.
Awesome. All right. Next to him, new roundtabler, and Jeff. Welcome to the roundtable.
Hello. I am Jeff Nielsen, also known as Captain Jeff, and I'm a host of the Airline Pilot Guy show.
That makes you an actual pilot, Captain Jeff?
I am. I'm an airline pilot for a major U.S. legacy carrier.
Nice. Interesting. All right. Well, I guess we could take a couple guesses as to who that might be.
Yeah, it's pretty easy once you know where I fly out of and what kind of airplane I fly.
Ah, very cool. Well, we can play Guess the Airline with Jeff as we go along in this round. And next to him, another new roundtabler. Joseph, welcome to the roundtable.
Thanks so much. I'm also a captain, but I'm a police officer captain. I'm not an airplane captain. I have the podcast Augmented Reality Dirt, and it's at ardirt.com, and I talk about emerging technologies that deal with basically like virtual reality, but it moves into taking that virtual world and bringing it to your visuals and being able to enhance your all of your different senses. So it's really just like a geeky show that's really taking off. So it's a lot of fun, and I really appreciate being here.
Very cool. 2 captains, and both taking quite a considerable amount of experience to reach each of those, right? I mean, to be a pilot, that takes a lot of training, and then a captain on the police force, that's not your first step. So you've been doing that for a while, or you're really, really good at what you did when you were a rookie. So that's awesome. 2 captains, didn't expect it, so welcome. And then on the end, returning roundtabler and friend of the show, Rob Greenlee. Welcome back, Rob.
It's great to be here, Ray and company. It's always fun to be on the roundtablers with all the podcasters.
You look like you got a little sun, Rob, and you're in Seattle.
I did.
So
I was actually out on the sun, and I got a little bit. I got a lot of vitamin D, I guess.
You must have been on vacation. It wasn't in Seattle.
It's been sunny here. You'd be surprised. Yeah.
All right. I'm on the West Coast, but I am in sunny California, so it's a little different.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess the first thing to really start off with, and we've discussed, as I mentioned, we've discussed apps, podcasting apps on here before. I mean, specifically, you can go to Podcasters Roundtable 24 and 44, where we get into that. But we're going to try to take a slightly different approach here. And the fact that we're talking about it again maybe says something about apps as a whole. I would say the rise or the amplification of podcasts has happened over the past 10 years, right? We've seen things change, I would say, as a result of apps, hopefully for the better. We can talk about that, but hopefully we'll get a little into sort of the big picture about apps and maybe the future and where they've brought us and maybe the evolution of podcasts as far as apps are concerned, and are apps the future at all? And I think Rob will help us with that one. And it sounds like some exciting news from Rob today, which I didn't know of. So good coincidence, and we will talk about that when we talk about apps for producing a show. There are more options. All of a sudden, there are more options. So I want to ask right up front, each roundtable, to get everyone involved, what app do you use to consume podcasts? That's always interesting because there are so many out there, right? So Daniel, what do you use, or do you use an app at all? You still plugging in your iPod to your repeater?
Well, I now use my iPhone as my podcast player, and that was part of the reason that I switched from Android to iPhone, is because the podcast experience was much better on iPhone, and that was even before the podcast app. And now on iPhone, I am using the podcast app from Apple.
Yeah, I have the app obviously because if you have iOS whatever 8 or it's there. You can't get rid of it, right? And as a podcaster, it's good to check your show how it looks across different apps. So if you don't have, if you're not checking the native iOS app, you have an iPhone, you want to do that. Check your show inside there. And I like it. I was already on Pocket Cast, so I've settled there. I just enjoy using it. It was one of the better ones that was out when I started podcasting, and there have been improvements to both of those, which we'll get into a little later, because I'm interested in show notes and how those interplay with apps and how it makes it easier for producers and consumers to maybe do those calls of action. Anyways, we'll talk about that because I'm curious. I have some interesting consistency issues when it comes to that. Maybe Daniel can help us with that one. But Jeff, what app do you use to consume podcasts? Do you even listen to shows?
No, I don't. There are no good shows out there.
I agree.
No, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm sure all of us do. And I, like Daniel, use the podcast app and Pocket Cast, but mostly the Apple podcast app, because I figure that most of my audience is going to use that app if they have an iPhone, so I want to make sure it looks right on that. It sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's a newer app. So I think that you probably have a lot of established, like me, I don't switch because I'm on Pocket Cast and I like it. And when Apple first launched that app, it was okay, but it's come a long way. But I just haven't shifted over. We get comfortable, right, in an app. So I don't know. I don't know if a lot of people are using it. I'm curious. There was supposed to be sort of this like windfall of new listeners listening to podcasts because they can't get rid of the app. I don't know. I mean, do you guys think that has happened?
Yeah, I think it has to some extent. Yeah, I think that people, were more likely to give it a try if it was defaulted in their operating system.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into that because this is not the case across all OSs, right? Some people are not helping us out in the podcast in the world. But Joseph, is it Joseph or Joe or
Either one.
Either one. All right. Well, Joseph, what app are you using?
Well, I'm an Android guy, so like all my computers are Apple computers, but I'm on the Android, and I love Dogcatcher. Dogcatcher is only a few dollars. It's very robust. It has so many different podcasts I listen to, and it's very simple. You could speed up. You could, I like to do like maybe some people like to do 1.5 if they want to get through it, but sometimes I like to take my time. It's like a fine wine where you want to enjoy it. So I really like Dogcatcher, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a purist. I listen at one times. It's just weird. Although, so there's Overcast. I don't think anyone's going to say they're using Overcast unless Rob, he's last up here. But Overcast has an interesting feature where they speed it up by taking out the gaps, I think, and that can be a little bit more pleasurable than if 1.5 speed doesn't work for you. I sent someone to Overcast recently, and they said, "I love it. I love that technology." So And I think I tried it. It didn't sound too weird. Have you guys tried that?
Yeah, I've tried it. I mean, I think in some shows it sounds good, and other shows it doesn't, depending on how fast the host speaks.
Interesting.
As far
Interesting.
as the halftime speed faster or something like that. I don't know. I think it's kind of, I don't know if it's a great feature or not, but it can get you through more content quicker, I guess, if you can listen that closely.
Yeah. So Rob, what do you consume on and what app?
Well, as far as mine is concerned, I consume on a lot of different apps, and believe it or not, I still use the Zune and Microsoft podcast app platform still today. The Zune software is still available for the Windows PC, and it still has the whole catalog that I built, so I have all my subscriptions still in there on my PC. So as far as on mobile, anyway, it goes the whole spectrum from the Overcast to Stitcher to Spreaker to I go out and I find all these kind of new apps and new companies that are forming in the space. I think one that's out there too that's interesting is Antenna, and there is just so many new ones that are coming out. I mean, Spreaker is doing stuff, and each show is. I mean, a lot of shows are coming out with their own apps too. So there is a huge amount of selection. I love the NPR One app that's out there, but there's just so much cool stuff that's going on, so much experimentation. It was sad to see Swell kind of get absorbed by Apple, because I saw a lot of cool stuff that they were doing, though they didn't get a lot of traction. But a lot of the back end stuff that they were doing was really cool, and the Overcast folks are kind of pushing the envelope on features and functionality, which I think is great.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that some of the Swell stuff, was it bought to help podcast, or is it more for music in Apple's case?
I think it was bought for their capability about building technology around machine learning. Mm-hmm. If you really look at the founders of that company and a lot of the engineers that were working there, they all had PhDs in machine learning, which Swell was doing a really good job of kind of sifting social media information and usage data and mapping them against what people's interests are to create playlists and things like that, and creating this real dynamic. And I think Apple saw that and they said, well, that's what we'd like to have in our apps, is kind of a little bit more curation based on personalization. And I think that's a big thing, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, that's you've got some opinions on it, which they're interesting because when it seems a little polarizing, it sometimes it can be right, because you're like, oh, that's dramatic, but they may be going that way for a reason. So Shannon Fitzgerald in the chat, she says, in fact, what is a podcast app? She said, like Stitcher, ? I missed the first 5 minutes. So we didn't define what a podcast app. Daniel, do you think we need to establish what that is?
Well, it can be easily confused because people will sometimes ask, what's the best podcasting, ing, app, when actually they want a podcasts app. And I think the main difference between those minor labels is one is used for podcasting and the other is used to consume podcasts. But we're kind of talking about any app that has anything to do with podcast or podcasting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the point. We sort of want to open a can of worms and see where it goes. So we do keep it broad, but it was all of a sudden I felt the need to say, hey, maybe we should define what we're talking about, because we can do that we get caught up in the jargon and the experience, and we just say something and don't explain what it means. So we never know the skill level of the Roundtable. Hopefully, there's brand new Roundtablers here watching and starting or going to start a podcast. That would be awesome. So I'm curious. So I guess we've kind of answered that, but I was going to say, are apps synonymous with mobile? Right? What do you think? I mean, Jeff,
Yeah, you basically said, we're going to be talking about podcasting apps, and then I kind of thought of apps that I use on my phone, but I also thought about all the apps that I use when I produce and create my podcast. Mm-hmm. So to me, it means all of that.
Yeah, definitely.
But before we go that place, I was wondering, can you guys really stand listening to your own shows on Stitcher?
Well, there you go. See, that's the spirit of the Roundtable. Just bring it up and mix it up. I like it. So I think if you're watching the chat, and the best place to chat, at least right now, to Daniel's dismay, is the event page. I think, Daniel, can you break out the player? Isn't there usually you can pop it out or something like that?
You can open a new tab.
Open a new tab. All right. Sorry, guys. Anyways, if you're in the chat, I see that coming up already, and I know they're getting into that a little bit. So personally, as a consumer, no, you're never going to catch me consuming on Stitcher for my personal use. As a producer, Stitcher is great. And personally, I don't think that the people who consume on Stitcher care about the audio quality, or they wouldn't be on Stitcher. Maybe they don't have an alternative. Rob, Stitcher, do we know if the primary consumption of Stitcher is Android based, because Android really doesn't have an app?
Yeah, from what I've seen, it's about almost 3% of the Android kind of experience on podcasts. So it's the second largest behind. Well, no, I think it is the number one platform. I mean, if you look at it, a lot of the consumption all the way down on the Android side is fragmented below 3%. So there's just a lot of apps that are in that ecosystem that comprise that 100% of usage. And because Google has never stepped up to get a first-party service going, there hasn't been a kind of a similar type of Apple scenario happen over on the Android side. I don't know, it may be too late to do that now, but it would be great to see Google step up and do a first-party service. I just think that they have that already with what they're doing with YouTube.
And so on a recent round, we actually talked a little bit about Bing and how they're handling, or Windows is handling it. Maybe you, since being a former Microsoft guy and a podcast guy, maybe you can clear it up a little bit.
Well, I was involved in that whole process that the company went through to obviously move from Zune into Oblivion, which is kind of what it is somewhat. Zune is slowly, it's still out there. The catalog is still live. Some apps are still using that catalog, but the new app that was created by the Windows Phone team, and that app I pitched for a couple of years trying to get them to build a whole new catalog, and they actually have it. They had it all architected, because I worked with the development team to architect a new catalog, because they were going to shut down the Zune catalog and they were interested in starting a new one. But as it turned out, they built an app that basically did a search query against Bing to pull RSS feeds, which I told them was a horrible choice. Most of the team that was involved in the app knew that was a horrible choice, but they didn't have any other options. So we'll see. They have an app on Windows Phone that's pre-installed. It comes with the operating system, which is the only other platform that happens today. So you got Apple and Microsoft with pre-installed apps and their mobile operating systems. And as you see what's happening with Windows, and as they move towards a universal app store, you can see a scenario where maybe that podcast app becomes available on Windows. Or on Xbox, potentially, depending on what they want to do. And if they may decide to build a new catalog that will be available on there versus just doing a search query against Bing, which brings up all sorts of results that have nothing to do with podcasts necessarily. So anyway, that's kind of the short 2-minute story on what's happening at Microsoft with podcasts.
Yeah, I'm sure maybe that brought up one or two thoughts for Daniel, so I'll let him stew on that. But I'm curious. So for a podcaster who has a podcast and wants to show up on a Windows Phone in that native app, they just need the RSS feed on their website?
Well, there's two ways primarily to get a show into that app, and that would be to make sure it's properly indexed in Bing. So Bing has a Bing webmaster area that allows you to submit websites to them, so Bing will check on the status of your index site through this webmaster area on their Bing kind of portal area, and so that's one way, is to submit through that, and then another way is to just tell your audience to cut and paste the RSS feed into the app. So those are the two options.
Yeah, we've hinted or hit a little bit on, is having a website even important? It seems like in this case, it certainly would be helpful to have a website if you want to be found in that sort of ecosystem right now.
Well, and also to have your podcast RSS feed as a link off of your website. You know, that's maybe the only way that a listener can get access to your show on apps that maybe don't have a deep catalog.
Daniel, any thoughts about the last 3 minutes there with the history and the way we're dealing with Windows right now?
Well, I like the direction Windows is going.
Yeah, you mentioned that last time. You said you kind of hoped Google would do that as a possible solution to what they're doing now.
Well, because Google, they're a search engine. Microsoft is also a search engine, and they're leveraging their search engine power for cataloging content. That's great. That makes it a bit more automated, sort of, but also a bit more complicated. But what does excite me is with the Windows 10 versions and development that's happening, how more and more apps, like what Rob was saying, are going to start being able to cross over, maybe not necessarily run the exact same app on both platforms, but maybe virtually run it or even just stream from one platform to the other. Because I think like with Xbox One, what you'll be able to do with a Windows 10 PC is that you can stream a game from Xbox One to your Windows 10 PC. Why they don't just allow you to run the Xbox One games on your Windows 10 PC, I don't know, or vice versa. But, I mean, well, there are many reasons they might do that. But you could have the same potential with a podcast app where maybe the podcast app lives on one Microsoft Windows something powered device, but then can stream to all of the other devices. Like if your computer is turned on, your Xbox will recognize your podcast library on it. I could really see Microsoft doing that kind of thing because that's Microsoft's power is integrating everything really together since they're making software for all of these different devices. So bringing it across all of these platforms, connecting them together through like a media center sort of thing, I think could be great for the system.
There we go. I was just looking at my email, seeing what happened to Joseph. He's back. That's good news. We didn't exclude him. He dropped off for a minute there. So the fun of live streaming. So Jeff, so I guess I can imply that you do not like listening to your podcast on Stitcher.
I cannot stand it, but I'm listening. With earbuds. Somebody was saying in the chat room or in the chat that they can listen to it over their car speakers, but they don't ever listen with headphones. And I guess in my mind, I think that the people who are listening to my show using the Stitcher app are people who are listening it through their car speakers or something like that. But I hadn't considered that a lot of people with Android might also be using the Stitcher app to listen to my show as well.
Yeah, I mean, through your car, definitely it's going to be a lot easier. There's a lot of just noise in your car that podcast can get lost in or has to compete with. But for me, it's just I hate that they're changing what I have spent a lot of time producing and putting out there. Now, on the one hand, if you have a producer who's producing at, even 128 or 192, I mean, it could just be, it's too big, right? And maybe, I mean, I like 128, but I spent time to make it sound good, and then Stitcher just takes it and says, okay, thank you, we're going to make this sound bad, at least for an audio file. So we're podcasters. If you spend time editing your stuff, you get a sensitive ear, okay? And so, like I said, I think a lot of the people using Stitcher, they would know the difference. They don't care. So I don't find it to be a problem. I just want people to consume. But and I've heard Stitcher sell it as a plus. Noah, he sort of said, this is an advantage, right? Because they are with bandwidth and all that stuff. I don't quite buy it, but
I can give a little bit of background on that because I worked with Noah back in 2007 or so, just as he was forming the company. And the whole concept of what he's doing really came from the old company that I worked for called Mobilecast up here in Seattle. It was a very early kind of mobile podcasting platform that I was involved in. It was really kind of a music startup that got involved in podcasting from 2005 to 2007, and they later sold to HP as a music company. But they basically modeled after that, which is, back in the early days, with Razor phones and low-speed bandwidth, that a lot of people had data plans that didn't have a lot of data in them, right? So they had to stream, right? And a lot of these devices didn't have wide codec support on them. And so Noah basically took that model and said, well, early on, because he started that company a long time ago, and we're going to capture all the audio files and we're going to re-encode them into the proper audio codecs for delivery to mobile devices, because there was limited mobile device support. And so that's where that came from originally. And what's happened subsequently, right, is we've gotten better bandwidth and we've gotten wider, more consistent standards around codec support on mobile devices. So there really hasn't been as much of a need for Stitcher to have that capability of re-encoding. But I think what they got caught up with was saving on costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
they should say that that's what it is, because I'm more forgiving when you just tell me I'm a businessman and I need to save costs.
Yeah, exactly. So there isn't a lot of reason to do that now. I mean, other than cost savings, and I know Stitcher for many years had a hard time monetizing. They had a hard time making enough money for their investors. So they
cashed in now, right? So they're good. Yeah.
Well, they sold, but they didn't sell for more than what was invested in them. Let me just put it to you that way. So it wasn't as good of a sale as everybody, I think, involved in the company had hoped for.
Right.
That's the hard truth about it.
And things have changed a little bit. I know that I've seen people complain that they can't get a response when they, I know they're in transition with Deezer, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and their teams are merging. Noah's not involved as much as he was before, and this kind of raises a whole other discussion around apps and the merging of the streaming music platforms and podcasting. And this is a classic example of what's happening. I think for a lot of spoken word content is that it's moving towards streaming more. And as you look at Deezer and you look at Spotify and you look at these other streaming platforms that are moving towards spoken word content, you're going to see a lot more pressure to get podcasts streamed to mobile devices versus downloads. And
downloads are still the primary way people. I mean, it's still
75%.
I always have to cover this, because there are people that use the words interchangeably. I don't think anyone really knows what anyone's saying when they say stream and download, right? So you're saying the majority of people are downloading. What does that mean exactly? What are they doing?
Well, I mean, it is a blend of two things. It's literally downloading a media file from one location to another, typically onto a mobile device, but there's also download progressive streaming, which is basically the same thing as a download. It just happens to play through a media player. So you have...
And that one doesn't save to your device, though. It's cached, but you can't access it necessarily.
Yeah, you can't go in and drag and drop it somewhere. It basically just caches it, and it pretty much disappears at some point. But what I'm talking about is a lot of these streaming platforms are doing some HLS streaming, which is bit chunk delivery through a more traditional streaming server. And I think you look at like a Spotify, Pandora, even the iTunes folks, I think, are starting to play in this as well at some point here once they launch their music streaming service. But more and more of this content is going to be delivered through true streaming technology, right, versus just an HTTP download, right? So that's where the friction is going to come at some point. And it's not necessarily a friction. It's just a different method of delivery that podcasters need to realize is going to start happening. And Stitcher was an fairly early player in that.
Yeah, and then I guess we might get into issues with these different platforms serving ads against our content, right? I mean, does Stitcher insert ads automatically without your permission? You click the box, permission, but
I don't think they insert ads in your content, but they do surround your content. Yeah.
So
pre-roll and post-roll type of, in playlist playback scenarios. Yeah.
Right. We talked about Bing and native apps. When it comes to submitting, Joseph, what have you done to be on these apps for your own show?
Well, I did. First of all, I have Libsyn, so I'm hosting there. But I actually decided to splurge and go for the actual Libsyn app. And I know you guys have discussed, having your own show app in the past. And it really came down to me an extra $10 a month to pay for that, and also the Apple fee, which was about $100, and then your Google Play fee, which was $25 a year. And for that little amount of money, to me, even though I don't have big numbers like you guys, I actually did see, I'd say, about a 20% increase in traffic. And the cool thing is that using the pretty links, I was able to basically direct people to, if they had an Apple, if they have an iOS, I would say go to my domain name, / Apple app, and they would go right to the iTunes store or App Store and download it. And if I said, my domain name / Google app, they would go right down to the Google Play. So it was a real easy way for me to steer them to my own app. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, well, maybe they have their own podcatcher and they aren't going to want to download your app. So for the loyal fans, and everybody has their loyal fans, we would actually have some bonus content that could only be found on that app. So that was a way to kind of draw your real loyal people that really want to kind of hear what you're saying every episode, and then just kind of drive it that way. But for the amount of money, and I think it was Dave Jackson that said it last time, like, you got to be out of your mind not to do it because of the little amount of money. But obviously for me, I'm on the Libsyn platform, so that's what they offer, and I've been very happy with it. And it seems like people, and the cool thing is whenever you run into somebody, you're like, what kind of phone do you have? And they're like, oh, I have the iPhone. You're like, oh, enter this domain name right now and in front of me, and then they download the app, and hopefully they'll keep it on their phone.
So wait, did you say that you have a pretty link? Where does the pretty link take somebody?
What you do is that whatever the link is for, let's say, your app to download at the Google Play Store, you have the URL. So I would take my pretty link and then redirect it right there. And then for iTunes or for the Apple App Store, I would do the same thing. So you tie it to your pretty link, which is your domain name and whatever you want to rename it. And it was just a simple way to shoot people right to the app to download it. And they get used to that. When they find out your pretty links, to always hear you guys, say your domain name in episode 2 or 3, and it's just so easy to remember. And as you keep pounding that every show and reminding people that this is a simple way, for all the new people that get turned on to your show, it's a real simple way to kind of try to steer them to the app. So it just seems to, again, I'm, even though I've been podcasting for 3 years now, I don't have as many episodes as I would like, and that's kind of it's funny. I laugh being on the show because all of the best practices that you want to do for podcasting, I break all the rules, and I pay a price to a certain extent. But you're learning, and you want to kind of find other ways to steer people and turn them on. So.
Yeah, best practices are, you can take them or leave them. They're not the best practices for everybody. We have to talk to a generic audience, and so it helps to say, hey, do X, Y, Z. But I really hope that people don't do it because we said it. Hopefully, it's just take it with a grain of salt. Try it. If it doesn't work for you, please try something different. I mean, the coolest thing about podcasting is it's complete freedom. It's completely open. I want to see people do stuff that we've never seen before. So yeah, break the rules, please. So, but the only weird thing about the Libsyn app, from what I've seen, we have one at work, but you got to download an app to get an app, right? So that's kind of the podcast box. Are you able to get?
No, this is different. This is a standalone. This is a standalone
so you
app.
Pay more for that though. What's the difference between the one where you have to download the podcast box app to get your app and the one you have?
Right. That one I'm not even sure because I didn't want that. And for me, for the extra $10, I got my own standalone app, and I guess they work with an app making company that creates it and tailors it. And it's easy. It's a standalone app. And I think the other thing too is that, as a podcaster and creating your platform, you're always, you want to be seen as a credible person, obviously. But when you have that app, people think that you're like mysterious, like, wow, he has an app, it doesn't really mean much, but it sounds nice, and people were like, wow, let me check that out, and obviously I think that the people fall in love with the personalities along with the awesome content that goes along with it. But it's nice to have that opportunity. And from what I've seen so far, and I'd say I've been 6 months into it, it's been working really well. And I see that I think that more people are turning to it. And I think that as Rob was talking about the streaming, I think there'll always be a need for that offload, that download, because I'm going to be in an area where I won't be able to get a cell signal, and I have a quick Daniel J. Lewis story that he doesn't even know that I wanted to share, and I'm going to tie this into the downloading of streaming.
Awesome.
Is that when I first wanted to learn about podcasting, I came across the Audacity to Podcast with Daniel. And at the time, Daniel only had about like 57 shows, so that shows how long ago it was. And I downloaded all of them, and I was in New York City, and I was on a dirty, stinky subway, and I'm listening to Daniel J. Lewis talk all about how awesome podcasting is. And I've been listening to podcasts for years, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. If I could be in this dirty subway listening to Daniel J. Lewis, I don't even know where he was broadcasting at the time. I'm like, this is wild. Like, this is so cool. So he was like one of the people that inspired me to take that chance. And I had no signal in the subway, and it was cool. And I looked around, and everybody is just doing their own thing. But I'm like listening to awesome content on how to build my own platform through Daniel's voice. And that's the type of stuff where I think people need to pay that forward. And that's why I think this Roundtable is so important to kind of share that, and you guys are always paying it forward, and I appreciate just being here listening to you guys.
Awesome. Now, cool, inspiring story. It's always awesome to hear those. And I agree, first impressions can be everything. I think all of us who have been in it for a long while, I mean, do you remember when you probably submitted a question to a podcast and maybe they read it on the podcast, or they even answered your email and you thought, oh, this is incredible, because you put yourself behind a mic and you inevitably, like it or not, there's going to be some layer of, I'm listening to this person, I know something about them, but it's mysterious. Getting on iTunes, if you said I have a show on iTunes, that used to be extremely mysterious. You must think you must know someone at Apple. How can you do that, right? So, even something as a nice quality motion graphic in the beginning of your video, I mean, really makes it even look like you have a whole team behind you, and you might not. Maybe you just are handy with motion graphics, or maybe you paid for it, right? So I think those impressions that we make with our show, I think they're huge. They can be huge. And all of us were just, you can see them in my dining room, but, people then, they just, like you were saying, I was listening to Daniel J. Lewis or something, and it's like, it's just a dude in his house who studies about, really loves podcasting, but that's what happens. So, I think it's really neat. But we can dive a little bit more into having that, because, well, Daniel, any clarification on the difference between the app that you have to download an app with Libsyn? I feel like I should know this, but I don't.
Right. Podcast Box is essentially like another podcast player designed by Libsyn, and people can, you have different options that you can work with, but essentially one of those options is you can add a podcast. Previously, you would purchase it, but you would still be using Libsyn's app to get your podcast. That's the easy way. The way, though, of having your own standalone app is so that people search and download your show's app, not Libsyn's app, and then have to add your show to it. But it's like downloading the Podcasters Roundtable app, and then all that app does is it lists the episodes from the Podcasters Roundtable.
Yeah, it's strange because we have that at work, but you have to actually. I produce a show for an awesome woman in L.A. It's called Whistling in the Dark. You guys should check it out, but it's explicit, so it's not, don't play it in your speakers at work. It's an interview show, Hollywood types, pretty cool. But we have an app through Libsyn, but you still have to go. It's her app, but you have to get the podcast box because it's the $20 account. I guess I should bring someone. We should get Rob on here, the other Rob. But we won't dive too much more into it. But I know that just the $20 level, it's the one you have to charge for, minimum $199. But you still got to do that podcast box thing. So it sounds like there's a level above that,
right?
Where I could, because that's what I'd want. That's actually what I thought we were getting. I would like that standalone, but I know it can be considerable. I think it's a considerable amount of more, right? Like
It's
not.
It last that they said it was $10 per month. There's a $50 setup fee, and it's one per show. Rob did talk about all of this back in Podcasters Roundtable. I'm still trying to find it, but in somewhere in the 20s or 18, somewhere around 18, I think. 24. That's it. Episode 24 was Rob
24
Walsh.
and 44. Those are the other rounds we talk about apps. So, anyways, that's good. We know there are different options. It's on top of whatever plan you have. So if you're interested in that, check it out. But let's talk about people not on Libsyn. You want an app. Spreaker actually has a way for you to get an app for your show that is, relatively affordable for what it would cost to get an app made. And interesting news coming out of Spreaker as far as apps go. Today, they came out with like an iOS studio app. So if you know Spreaker, they do live streaming. And this lets you mix in sounds. But I opened it up. I downloaded it today. I opened it up, and you don't even have to be live streaming. You could use it just to record your show and still do those mixing elements. So Rob told me today he works with Spreaker, right? Not necessarily for, but works with, maybe consults. So Rob, tell us a little bit about having an app. Let's start off. Let's just continue the having your own app, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the studio. But you can get your own app via Spreaker, right?
Yeah, you can. It's $99. You can get your own app made for you. It's actually not done by Spreaker. It's done by an outside company that we've contracted with.
It's a nice clean look. Is that $99 one time or every year?
Yeah, it's $99 one time.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, anyway. I've only been working closely with Spreaker this is like my second week, so I'm getting involved in it and kind of. Yeah, I'm still working for Podcast One as well, so I'm kind of splitting my time between both companies, trying to help them kind of help both companies move forward and do what I can. But I'm really excited about the whole Spreaker platform and what they're trying to do of offering a kind of a 360-degree solution for podcasters, and they are very focused on podcasters, unlike Blog Talk Radio, which talks about creating radio shows. Well, this platform is really all about creating on-demand podcasts.
But what do you mean 360 solution for
podcasts? Yeah, so having apps that you can create shows, you can either create live broadcasts, you can record, just like what you were saying. Also has listening apps, has a website that can give you a page. And the company has plans to offer some monetization, and it has hosting, so it has great plans for creating RSS feeds. And so if you go to the site at Spreaker.com, you can really see it on there how they're trying to offer a one-stop solution for the entire ecosystem. And I think that's what was really attractive to me about working with them. I mean, actually what they're doing was a lot of what I wanted to create at Zune and Microsoft. So it was a perfect kind of match for me to get involved in what Spreaker's doing. I think they have a fantastic team that's scattered around the world. I mean, it's a global company too. It's based out of Berlin. So they have a U.S. presence too, and I'm really excited to actually be working with them.
Yeah, I mean, $99 is a steal when you consider apps and if you look just a couple years ago, what it would cost to get an app made. So Libsyn helped with that. $99 one time. I hope they stick around. It almost sounds too good to be true, but I've seen it. It's nice and clean. Now, we talked again about first impressions. I really love the clean look of it, and I know Libsyn is going to be updating their apps, and I think they look great too. So. Yeah, at $99, and it's really basic. It just plays your episodes, and I'm hoping that maybe they'll build a little more into that app. But man, if you need an app, you're not on Libsyn. Now you do need to have your shows on Spreaker platform, right? Daniel, do you have Are you on Spreaker?
You have to have them, on Spreaker's platform, and that is part of the disadvantage if you want all of your stats in one place. That then your app download stats show up in Spreaker's stats, not in your Libsyn or Blueberry stats. But Spreaker can either replace or be in addition to your regular Libsyn hosting or Blueberry or wherever.
Sounds like a SoundCloud type. I mean, like where you would have to go and gather your stats from Spreaker in addition to your host stats.
Right.
And
So I
Leslie
have to
gets,
say, I mean, Spreaker is working hard to try and bridge those gaps, right? To connect those dots. I mean, it is a platform that has some powerful kind of transferring of feeds. So you can import a feed from another hosting platform directly onto Spreaker, get all those files hosted, and a whole new feed is created. But we are working on trying to cross communicate across all of these other platforms to share stats. I mean, I'm a firm believer in, if you're wanting to create a show on one particular platform, you should be able to get access to the stats from all these other platforms that maybe have your show but isn't primarily distributed on those platforms.
Let me give just a little clarification on the pricing. I've got the page loaded up here. It's $99 per year
For
for Android or for iOS. Any updates that you want to publish that require a resubmission to the App Store cost $15 per submission.
Okay.
okay,
Thank
well,
you,
and that might actually keep them in business. So, so while a lot of people were probably already on the webpage trying to get their $99 one-time app, I don't know, it might be hard to stick around on that model. So good and bad news there, but it's good overall, and that's cool. Because I mean, are there any other? Has anyone, Jeff? Have you ever looked into getting an app for your show, or don't care?
Well, I do, and I'm a little irritated because I thought that at some point earlier on, Libsyn switched from the customized apps that Joseph has to this crap podcast box thing. I'm sorry. I'm not very happy with it. It's just kind of a clunky solution, and I didn't realize I could still have my own app standalone.
Okay, so you're a little confused like me. So what are you... So how do you see it? What you have to have the podcast box?
Yeah, you got to do the podcast box, then you got to buy the app within, or your access to your show within the podcast box, and it's just really super clunky. And I just figured that that's what you had to do. But honestly, I don't even promote it on my show because I have a guy that's doing my website, and he has and he's a programmer, and he's like making an app for my show standalone. And it just hasn't happened yet. But so that's why I'm just kind of biding my time and hoping that eventually we'll have that app out there.
Yeah. Well, so there is confusion. I mean, we need Libsyn to clear it up. So hopefully it can maybe I can clear that up in the show notes, or we'll have Rob on in the future and figure out what's going on. But because it sounds like you can do it either way. So I definitely want to find out.
Yeah, I'm
excited
excited
what the
about
answer
that.
is. Yeah, because that's ideally. I mean, when you think of having your app, that's what you think. You don't think of. You certainly don't want to have your listener have to jump through an extra hoop. And I understand how that works for them, and it's a cost thing as well. That it's all sort of put. It's not separate. They're not submitting a new app to the Apple Store every time. It's sort of tucked into their single app, which is Podcast Box. But there are other options apparently, because Joseph's got it. So we'll have to find out.
My whole thing is that, I mean, you guys are all geeks. You guys will spend for the best mixers and all of this other equipment. So just pony up a few extra, for it's really an extra $120, and then you throw on a few extra bucks. But you put gas in your tank, and I know it's getting cheaper, but it's almost like extra Phillips a year. We're not talking a lot of money, and for the potential of getting the exposure. I think the tough thing is, and as Daniel was just talking about, the different options with not just Libsyn, you just have to make sure whatever your platform is, you don't want that platform to crumble, or then all of a sudden, be split up, and then one company goes out of business, and you're kind of stuck. So you kind of have to do your homework, and I think, as what was it, Jeff was just saying, about him, getting his own web hosting guy or whatever to create his own app, but you really just want to make sure you follow it out. But it's really, we're not talking a lot of money. If you're willing to go to a conference or hop on an airplane, to me, it's just worth it. So I don't think it doesn't have to necessarily be Libsyn, but I think it's just another way to get that exposure out there. And I know a lot of people are on Stitcher and all the other different ones, but to me, it's just worth that money. We're not talking about a lot of money.
Yeah, so. I think that probably the common hesitation, because I mean, oftentimes podcasting is a hobby, so people are already stretching the limit of their budget, but the return on investment, I don't think that we have established or anyone's quite sure, is it worth it, right? So the guys who have an app like yourself have seen it after you've gotten the app that it is worth it for your show. But, there are those questions. Hey, people, they could get my show in an app and get all the other shows. So the question is, what extra exposure, I guess, does it give you? It is nice to be able to say I have an app. You are in the App Store, right? So maybe your topic is more searchable in something like iTunes. I don't know. Daniel, do you think, or Rob, do you think having an app, is the return on investment? Is it there?
Oh, I think so. Because an app...
But you don't have one, right?
I don't have one because I run a podcast network, which just makes everything complicated. But I think it does help you because, for one thing, people know how to install an app much more than they know how to subscribe to a podcast. So it's much easier to just tell people, open the App Store, search for this app, or visit this website and it'll take you to the app to download it for free. I recommend you make your app free. And it does also give you an additional searchability point with your platform. And that's something I talk about in my SEO for Podcasters course, that by being a podcaster and having your own app, you can show up in more search results than if you are just in the podcast directories.
You just bummed out a lot of people because they're like, okay, I'm going to make the investment and I'm going to sell it and I'm going to get my money back. But Daniel doesn't think you should sell your app. Why?
Well, because it's a growth thing. Do you want to charge for every business card that you pass out? Probably
That's a good
not.
idea.
Your business, maybe, but then no one would want to buy it necessarily.
No one wants your
Unless
business card either. So
it could be something where your audience already sees the value in your content and your app provides extra value. Like Grammar Girl has done this and other podcasters have done this where they have exclusive content in their app. That's a good time to be able to sell it. But if your app is just a different way of consuming your content, I recommend that you not sell it. Look at it as a marketing piece, not a profit generator.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess, Rob, did you want to add on to that, or we can jump into the next?
Yeah, I just think that an app it's more of a commitment on the part of the listener to your program. Mm-hmm. I think. I mean, if a person's going to download your app, they've obviously made some sort of connection with you in another place, more than likely, and are actively looking to connect with your show at a deeper level. And so I think that there is some factor there of searchability. I mean, just like what's been said here, that it's just another store that you can be found under a certain topic genre, and that those two things right there, I think, are enough of a reason to have an app, is just to try and connect deeper with your biggest fans.
Yeah, I won't ask you to speak for Todd Cochran, but he sort of seems, I don't think he was really pro-app, but I think he maybe is coming around a little bit on that. Do you know?
Yeah, I don't think
Todd
has been a big fan, though his platform does have apps, but his apps were, I think, geared a little bit more towards video. So I'm not sure that those have really, I think, been as successful as I thought that he thought they were going to be. But yeah, I mean, I think that Todd's a little old school when it comes to podcasting, and the whole app for every show. I think he struggles to see a real value in that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still an interesting question, and we've talked about it here before, and I'm still interested in it. And as more people get apps, we'll be able to hear more. And I've definitely heard from. Obviously, it's from the people who have apps. They say you should have it, but they're a little more maybe they're a little more biased and a little more invested in it. But
Yeah.
I don't have an app either. But the reason I don't have an app is because I can't do what I want to do with an app. Now, I'm a podcaster, but really I consider myself a content creator, and I run a YouTube channel. I really want to integrate a lot of things into one app if I'm going to invest in it. And there are platforms. If you guys look, there are different platforms to have apps made. And I've explored some of those. And so for me, Yeah, if I was on the Libsyn plan that made it easy, I would probably do it, but I'm not. I'm on the Green. I would love to have an app. I think that, again, if a listener wants to listen to your show and that's how they want to do it, you need to let them consume however they consume, right? Being on Stitcher. This is when I talked about being a producer versus a consumer. As a producer, I want my stuff everywhere, right? I don't want any barriers to someone listening because, in theory, we're still battling that in podcasting. That is a little difficult maybe to still listen to a podcast. So I want it to be easy. So, when we talk about apps for consuming, there's also apps for producing podcasts, and I wanted to hit on that really quick. We did mention Spreaker came out today with something that lets you do that. It's free. It was free when I got it, so I think it's still free.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll remain free, but go to the App Store. It's iOS right now, so sorry, Android. Maybe they'll upgrade that. But you can record and you can mix in sounds. People are always wondering, hey, what are you using to get that sound of music or sound effect in real time? You can do that. And I haven't had time to play around with it, so this is, my call is to you to go out and check it out. Other ones, Boss Jock. I love Boss Jock. It helps me record. In mobile situations, helps a little bit. Sometimes I use it just to record simple audio. But Dave, who is the guy behind Boss Jock, contacted me today, and it sounds like they're coming out with a free version. It's probably going to be like a get your feet wet and see what it is, see what it's all about, and then if you need premium features. I don't know. I hope it's okay that I said that, Dave. I don't, but it sounds like they are going to have a free version. So Boss Jock is cool, and also Daniel, is Boss Jock on Android as well as iOS?
No, there are lots of, and this is probably what Spreaker's running into. There are latency issues on the Android side, and that's why Boss Jock just can't really be there.
Interesting.
But there are plenty of other good apps to consider for recording your podcast on mobile devices. Like Rode has a great app, Rode Rec. I think it is iOS only. Opinion. Ringer is for connecting multiple people, but you could even use it just by yourself. That will eventually be on Android. Any kind of mobile app that can record audio could be a podcasting app for you.
Yeah. Jeff, do you do your show from the road most of the time?
Yeah, I do it when I'm on my layovers, and I've experimented with Boss Jock Studio app a few times, but I still keep going back to the old school. I use a Zoom H5, and that basically has become my mixer and my recorder and everything else, and I just use my MacBook Pro for running all the apps.
So H5, MacBook, and what mic? I mean, you've got the Heil sitting there with a boom arm. You don't take that with you, do you?
I take the Heil with me, but not the boom arm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you
I also wanted to mention that Spreaker also has a recording app for Android as well.
Yep. Good. So more options. And I'm sure that anyone in the chat who's an Android person is probably lighting up the chat saying, hey, there's plenty of stuff to record with. And I don't doubt that. We are a bit iOS. Why is that? Let's talk about that. I mean, with podcast, let's talk about native apps. Okay. So iOS has the podcast app. That's new. But you, as a standalone app, it's newer, but was pretty easy still to consume. It was built into the iTunes app before that. So on iOS, it's kind of always been supported for podcasts. But Windows, not so much. But you said they do have a native app on Windows. So you buy a Windows phone, there's a podcast app, right, Rob?
Yep, it's pre-installed as part of the installation process of the operating system, and it can't be deleted.
Now, I'm on that app. I had Jim check. He has a Windows phone. Jim Collison checked it last time. This show is on there, but I'm not sure how I got on there. And that is part of the RSS feed on my website thing? Or you did
probably.
That?
Yes. No, I didn't add it. That's in Zune, so that's a separate deal. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We miss those days. I miss the days that it was cool. Zoom was cool, and they had the library online. Anyways, we won't reminisce. But you built a nice thing there, Rob. It's too bad they sort of killed your baby.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But so we move over to Android, and this is sort of like having when we talked about having iOS standalone podcast app that you could not remove from your iPhone. When that happened, everyone was like, "Hey, there's going to be this new flood of people listening to podcasts because it's right there and it's going to be obvious." I think that next frontier, along with being in cars, the dashboard's a big one, right? Android and Google. It feels like, I know Todd, again, bringing up Todd. If you don't know Todd, Todd Cochran co-host or is the host, and Rob co-host the New Media Show. Check out New Media Show. They talk about all this stuff, and I listen all the time. So it's newmediashow.com. Check that out. And, besides getting in the dashboard, Android and Google not really supporting podcasts. You don't have that native app. Do you guys think, Joseph, do you think if they had a native app, do you think that would make a difference on Android?
Well, Google's gonna own the world at some point, so it should be coming shortly, I hope. But yeah, I mean, if they start to do that, for sure. So it's just something we have to wait and see, I guess. So some things are just out of our hands.
Yeah, and Jeff, when it comes to, do you have people asking how they consume your show if they have an Android device?
I haven't had anybody ask. I'm figuring that the people just know how to do it.
All right. So do people? So there's always that debate. Do people on Android really listen to podcasts? We hear that people, if you listen to Rob Walsh, people use their Android phones differently. That's what we hear. I don't know how true that is. Now, it's weird because in this crowd you're going to get pushback because, yeah, of course they listen to podcasts, right? They're podcasters and they're podcast lovers. But outside of us, outside of our sort of bubble, what do you think about that, Daniel? Do you think that there's a difference between people who are using iOS devices and Android devices when it comes to consumption of podcasts or media in general?
Yeah, I think there is because, you see the difference, and it seems that people who get Android devices are wanting a smartphone. I know I'm stereotyping and I'm making sweeping generalizations.
It's hard.
Yeah, but it seems most of the time they want something that has all of the smartphone capabilities, and an Android phone is more affordable to them. It has more of the features, bigger screens previously, before iPhone 6, that is. And so it's a lot more interesting to them, the Android side, and they end up using it for very simple things. Like my dad's first smartphone was an Android phone, and he would use it for extremely basic things: email, phone calls, weather, GPS sometimes. Almost never media consumption unless it was YouTube. Now he has an iPhone, and I'm waiting for that day when he asks me, Daniel, how do I subscribe to a podcast? Or I'm really waiting for the day when he tells me, hey, Daniel, I just subscribed to a podcast. And I'll die happy then.
Isn't it your job to get him into podcasts? Aren't you part of International Podcast Day? Isn't it your call to arms?
But this is a social experiment here.
Okay.
Sorry, Dad.
Sorry, Dad. I'm messing with
I'm
you.
experimenting on you. But this is kind of my gauge. It's when my parents consume content that way, then I know the technology is more saturated.
Yeah. No, I get it. My dad showed up on Instagram and my head exploded. I'm like, that's just something not right about that. But, Dan Kramer in the chat, he says Auphonic has a recording program for both platforms. And yes, Auphonic is awesome. I love what Auphonic is doing. Just between all the sort of post-processing, automatic post-processing that they do, but as well, and I just went and got it the other day. I was like, why did I not have this app? And you can record into Auphonic as well, and apparently you can use it on Android as well as iOS. So that's awesome news. Yep, and I have that right here on my list, so I try to refer to my notes more often. I actually do take notes for this, so lying in bed late at night, let's have some thoughts. So in terms of thinking about apps and podcasting, Rob, are apps or directory apps, I guess podcatching apps, is that the future? I mean, where are we in terms of mobile consumption's now number one? Is that right, you guys? Rob?
Yeah, no, it's past the desktop consumption, yeah.
Now, does that mean... That still doesn't mean that people are necessarily using an app to consume, does it?
I think it's happening in a variety of places. I think it's happening in apps. I think it's happening in desktop software still, and it's happening off of web pages and social media. I think it's with embedded players. I think that's the ecosystem of podcasting today. Yeah.
What do we know about? So there's been recent numbers from Edison. They came out with a lot of cool numbers, and unfortunately, Dave's not here today. Didn't mention that, but he is in the chat, so he's somewhere. He's either on the road, not being safe, or he's safe at home, and I guess he should be in here. But we're almost done. But he has a lot of those stats queued up, I believe, in one of his recent School of Podcasting episodes. But what is Daniel desktop? Are people consuming more? Do we know about desktop consumption? Like I'm sitting here in front of my computer. I don't typically go and listen to a podcast here. I will do it on my phone. Does the switch to mobile for the majority of listening of podcast listens, does that mean it's coming from a phone or an iPad?
Yeah, and that
Tablet.
makes more sense because that's a lot more accessible for people, and the experience is a lot smoother for people that way because you use an app, the app automatically downloads all of that stuff, it can notify you. I'm looking at, let's take my Once Upon a Time podcast, for example. So I'll look at the stats for one episode, my most recent episode, or one of my most recent ones, and the distribution that I see is iOS number one. Windows, now iOS is at, what is that, 55%. Windows is at 22%. Macintosh is at 9%. So mobile is definitely dominating.
So is that the future, right? Or are apps? Do we need better apps? Are apps getting it done? I don't find new shows very often. I think the way we find shows these days are word of mouth primarily, but that doesn't mean that an app shouldn't be helping. I still miss the days where I would subscribe to a podcast in iTunes, and underneath it, I mean, this has to do with screen real estate, but underneath it, it would show me other people who have subscribed to this are also listening to this. And I would add like 5 more shows. Of course, that's why I had 90 shows in my podcatcher, which I don't have anymore. But I found shows that way. It's still the best discovery system, the original one, in my personal opinion. But Rob, are apps the future of podcasting? You alluded to like apps knowing who we are or knowing what we want?
I mean, really, I think the thinking that I have around this is really more kind of following along with what's happening in mobile and tech just in general around all of us basically having a smart agent of sorts, in our pocket, in our mobile device that knows more about us than we know about ourselves. And somewhere down the line, everything, I mean, a lot of things are going to be voice activated, or it's just going to know what you like based on your interests. And it's going to, that's where this machine learning concept comes from that we're seeing Apple work on, right, is that the technology we have in our pocket is going to know a lot about us and what we do and what we like to do and what we search for and what we listen to and what we watch. And I believe one facet of this is just the convenience of start listening to something in your house and you walk out to your car and your car already knows that you were listening to This American Life or one of Daniel's shows and it starts playing where you left off. I mean it's smart to know when you get in the car, when you want to listen to stuff, and it starts playing. Right when you get in the car, if you have programmed it or scheduled that, or it knows. And if you want to find a podcast, just like you said, it's a word of mouth thing, or you read about it and you just voice it to your phone. I want to listen, This American Life or whatever podcast you hear about, and you can say subscribe, or you can say add to my favorites list, and it will just be there and it'll monitor what you're doing and learn about that. So I think apps are going to slowly kind of disappear into the fabric of the operating system. I think it'll be more like a model, I think, in the future of what we saw with browsers with plugins. I think apps will be plugins to your operating system, and it will add to the intelligence of the operating system and not be this, this myriad of icons on your desktop. It's just there's going to be more context that will be applied to the data that you want to get access to, and there'll be services, there'll still be brands, and there'll still be sources of data, but those will be more integrated in the operating system. And you're starting to see that with Windows, with the the universal apps, and you can see the integration is starting to really happen.
Do you guys buy that? Does that sound like the future to you?
I'll go even beyond that because
Nice.
augmented reality is like wearable technology. So I think we're going to have all types of wearable technology devices, augmented reality glasses, and I'm going to see a hologram of Daniel J. Lewis in my house
Oh,
as
that's
he's
scary.
There
broadcasting.
you go.
In his underwear, maybe no, not his
Get
underwear,
out.
but it's coming, man. Wearable tech is here, so it's going to be here not too long ago. But that's the next future, and that's where AR kind of ties in. So just a little teaser for some of our people that haven't heard about it.
Well, the Apple
Well, yeah,
Watch.
I think those two kind of technologies kind of blend together. I think the context and the AR is going to be, yeah, you're right. It's going to be the future.
They give me a really nice, almost seamless earpiece, Bluetooth, and I'll get that Apple Watch and podcast right at my wrist and right to my ear, and then we can upgrade the implants, so we're good to go. But yeah, well, we'll start to head on out. I feel like there's still so much, so maybe we'll keep talking about apps until apps aren't the way anymore, because apparently that's not the future. We'll see. They are, but they're going to be more integrated and right into your head. I'm just going to download right to my
there you
brain.
go. Hey,
All right,
one question I wanted to ask everybody: does anybody here think that the new Apple Watch is gonna have an impact on podcasting? I think it's an interesting question.
I'll let you guys have a crack at that. But
Does it even have a microphone? Yes, it does. It does.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So you're thinking production. I'm thinking consumption.
No, both.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, if I had one, it would be really cool to have it that easy to access. We always talk about, you see stuff like people post on Facebook, like, you're this amazing human being and you were created to do those awesome things, and you spend your whole time with your face and your phone, right? So it's going to get worse, right? If our phone is as easy as it's right there, it's only going to get worse. You don't even have to pull it out of your pocket. But, I don't think I feel like it's be an extra supplement for those who are already the indoctrinated, the people who are already consuming podcasts. It'll make their experience better, just in terms of it's really easy to stop and start and swipe to the next episode and stuff like that. I don't know that it's going to necessarily increase. We talk about these things like sort of, is this really going to help podcasting? I don't feel like it. Won't hurt.
Well, it's tethering off of the phone, isn't it? Isn't it still tethering off of your phone anyway? So I think right now maybe not, but maybe down the road it'll be used for consumption. I think once it has its own signal there, and you can download.
Or think about this. For the person who's subscribed to the podcast, they receive a notification on their wrist that says such and such podcast episode is available to listen to right now. Yeah. Or such and such podcast is going live. Come listen to the live show.
Yeah, it definitely plugs you in that much more, right? So as a producer, you can say, hey, stuff is happening right now. You get an alert and maybe get more people to tune in, right? The Roundtable is live, and we can get more people. Hopefully you can watch on your watch. Okay, that's my new slogan for the Roundtable. Please watch on your watch. That's copyrighted, by the way. All right. Well, anyways, I feel like we could keep going, but we are. I hate saying we used up our time. There is no used up the time, but I'm going to let everyone go because it was, this is live. So thank you guys for being here. If you want to be on a future roundtable, get on the list, podcastersroundtable.com. Show up to the live if you can. Not everyone can. I totally understand that. And my hope is this feels like a regular time. It's not the goal of the show for it to always be at the same time. I will mix this up when I get a new. Clearly, if you're seeing on video, I'm in my dining room, that goes right into my kitchen. There is a studio that will be built detached from this house, and then that'll allow me more freedom. So if you can't make it this time, don't worry. I'm going to get that covered. And if you're at New Media Expo or even maybe Podcast Movement, we plan to be there. Rob will probably be there. Daniel, Joseph, you're shaking your head. Are you going to either one of those?
I'll be there. I'll be at New Media Expo for sure.
Well, make sure you come by, shake hands. We can hang out. That's going to be awesome. So if you're doing that, let us know, because there will be a live roundtable at New Media Expo. I'm looking at Dave in the chat as I say that it's on him. There better be. But yeah, lots of fun. We've done it before. We did it last year. Feels like 2 years now because that was the beginning of the year. But check it out. Come on out. But there will always be the archive. So thanks everyone for listening so much. As we go on out here, tell us the one website where you want people to go to listen to your podcast if they want to check it out. And Daniel, thanks again for co-hosting duties. Stellar job.
You're very welcome. This is fun. I know there are going to be a lot more apps. So go to podcastersroundtable.com and mention those apps. But I'm from theaudacitytopodcast.com and on Twitter at the Ramen Noodle.
Yeah, technically you put 2 websites in there, but I'm not going to stop him if he's going to plug the Roundtable.
One was yours. Or
It's yeah. That's what I said. I'm not cutting you off there. That's for sure. So, yeah. Thanks again, and Jeff, thanks for being a new Roundtabler. Hopefully this was fun, but I appreciate your feedback. It was awesome, and let us know where we can find your show.
Yeah. So do I need to send you my address so you can send me the T-shirt? Or
yeah, a few more rounds,
okay.
And then I'll take your address.
Airline Pilot Guy show, an aviation podcast, and it's airlinepilotguy.com.
You don't podcast from the cockpit ever, do you?
No, I wish I could, but we're not allowed to have electronic devices.
All right, because I see a view from my side of the cockpit, so I'm not convinced there's not maybe an iPhone that's maybe...
Not a real view.
Okay. Not a literal. All right.
My opinion.
All right. Well, if my pilot's podcasting, hopefully he invites me to the cab for some co-hosting duties, but yeah, please don't do that. Please don't do that. All right, thanks again. Joseph, thanks. New Roundtabler again. Captains, thanks for helping us out and sharing all your experience, and I had a great time.
Thanks, guys. It's an honor just to be here and just to hang out with you guys and just inspire so many other people, all the other people that are watching. So thank you so much, and you could find out more at ardirt.com. Thank you.
All right, ardirt.com. That makes it easy. All right, nothing doesn't get lost there. When you're creating your domain, sometimes it's hard. Even you say the Podcaster's Studio, there's 2 S's in there. So ardirt, pretty easy. So good one. All right. And Rob, thank you for coming back as always, sharing your insights. Some interesting stuff there going on at Spreaker. Congrats, and we look forward to having a good person in the seat there helping them out. So you can steer that ship pretty well, I'm sure, and we look forward to more stuff that they're doing because it sounds like they're doing awesome stuff. And so if you guys haven't been checking out Spreaker, go check it out. But thanks again, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, I can be found at newmediashow.com, at newmediashow.com. So every Saturday morning.
Yep, it's in my podcatcher. I still use the term podcatcher. It feels so old, but it's in my app. Listen to the New Media Show. I dig it. So thanks to you and Todd. It's always fun. And yeah, don't agree with Todd, man. Mix it up. That's the best part of that show.
Not.
That's the best part. Todd loves to mix it up. So we'll get Todd back on here as well. But all right, everyone, thanks again to the chat. Dan Kramer, Grant Burhans, lighting it up here. Gary Fawcett, who's always attending, which is rocks. John Valentine, Brian Godwin. Oh, no, it is Goodwin. I got that right. Craig Whelan, who's been on the round table. So John... Zabukenis, yep, that's right. I think I know that because I heard Dave say it. So, Dave, we look forward to Dave getting back here next time. But, all right, well, we will see you for round 48 in 2 weeks, should be. We're getting up to we're New Media Expo, so I have to check the calendar. But come on back, round 48. We'll see you next time. And until then, wave goodbye, everybody.